everybody's got in a food coma, had enough coffee. I'm Robert Douglas, and I'm here today to share a module that I've written for Drupal called the Apache Solr module. But the real interesting part is not the module that I wrote, which is just a connector, but really the technology that's behind that, which is what I'm going to spend the most time introducing today. This remote did work just a second ago. So before I launch into the technological part of my presentation, I would just like to assert that searching for content on Drupal.org can be problematic. Can I get a show of hands who agree? Disagree? Okay. You who disagreed in the back, how do you search Drupal.org? Oh, it was a mistake. You agree. Okay. Oftentimes on Drupal.org, noobs complain about the search. I can't find anything. Site's too big. Why don't we use Google? In fact, in 2004, a noob named Robert Douglas made exactly that type of suggestion, complaining about the search on Drupal.org, which, by the way, predated the current search implementation, which is markedly better. I don't even remember what was that, Drupal 4.3 back then, what the search was like. It was really bad. And it's now actually a lot better. But I complained. I requested that we replace Drupal's, the search box on Drupal.org with the Google search box. And a fellow named Bert Borland. Bert, are you here? Did you make it? I haven't seen him. He responded, since the development of Drupal and all OSS projects for that matter is scratching one's own itch, I would be against this. Once Drupal will use Google's search option, there will be less need for Drupal.org, the site, to code a good search engine in Drupal, the software, and that will stall Drupal's rise within the intranets running Drupal, since intranets can't, by definition, be spidered by external sites such as Google. Another con would be that Drupal has potentially much more and richer information about its own posting, taxonomy, users, etc., so that all of the information should be there for Drupal to do its own search, is the theory. So the summary that I took away from that, and I learned a lot from this post, and I didn't pursue the point, was that, first of all, we have to eat our own dog food in order to keep the development of the search engine going. Otherwise, if Google does it for us and we outsource it to them, then we won't care and we won't develop it. And the second thing that I took away is that our application knows so much about its own content that it should be able to kick Google's ass every time. So, well, actually, I think we can probably go find that post. I can just hop over into the browser real quick. Okay. So let's see. That was a post about Google search. And my name is Robert Douglas. The browser is betraying me and showing that I did the search. And I press go. No, we can't see it. Right. Okay. This whole presentation technology is... okay, so I searched for the logical things. I searched for Google and search and my name. I'm the one who wrote the post. I should be able to find it, right? And, I scrolled through all of these. There are 4 pages of results. I'll spare you that exercise right now since I've already told you that I did this. I can't find that post. But it's not even on the last page, and I think it's very important. Thank you. So, just as an experiment, I wasn't. This talk here today isn't about Drupal's bad search or anything like that. But more, I wanted to set it up so that you could understand why I would go searching for other solutions to the search issue. So just as a whim, I tried Google. No, I tried Cite, Drupal.org, Google, search, Robert Douglas. It's the first result. That wasn't my intention, but it was just too easy. So I think I've established the need, at least at some level, to keep thinking about Drupal's search technologies. Though we know all about our own content in a really rich way, and though I even knew which post I was looking for in advance, I wasn't even going out on a content discovery mission, I couldn't find that post on Drupal.org without going to Google. But I still don't think we should put the Google box up there. I still agree with Bert. Okay, let's see if we can get Keynote back up. It doesn't want to. Okay, that's frustrating. Keynote's disappeared. I used Keynote quite a bit in the last couple weeks, and it has a disturbing tendency to make my browser die, or my computer die. Okay. Sorry for this glitch. If anybody has a suggestion as to how to get Keynote to work? Thanks, Gerhard. That's 2 beers you owe me. That's really going badly now. Sorry, people. These computer things, sometimes I don't know about them. Okay. Okay, so on to the technology after that very embarrassing detour. So the base technology that I'm presenting here is a Java technology, and it's a relatively old and well-known technology. It's the Lucene indexer and searcher. Familiar with Lucene? Good, okay. It's got a pretty good reputation for its relevancy, its speed, its scalability, and its configurability. So talking about that, but you basically put text in and you get search results out. Solr is a newer technology that was introduced by CNET, and it's a web service that sits on top of Lucene and lets you access a Lucene index via HTTP, so post and get. You post content to Solr, that content gets indexed into Lucene, and then you can query Solr using GET requests, and you get the result sets for that content back. It's very flexible. It's got a number of return formats, including XML, JSON, serialized PHP. So that would be like a PHP array. Then you would unserialize that, and you'd have your results. So the results are very easy to handle from the programmer's point of view. The implementation I chose was XML, and I used simple XML to parse it. It was very easy. So that's what I just said, that you post the content to the Solr web service, and then you get the search results back. The good aspect of that, the beneficial aspect of this architecture, is that you can have many different clients posting and getting to the Solr server. So that's the whole allure of web services to begin with, is that you can have a centralized service that serves many clients. I'd like to point out right away that one advantage of this could be that you could search multiple Drupal sites with one Solr instance. So if you have a family of websites, right now it's very difficult to search the content of all 5 of your websites from one of them at the same time. So I put a search term in, I get search results from 5 different websites. Difficult to implement right now. You'd have to have some sort of database prefix scheme where you prefix the database, the search index database table, and all 5 of the sites have to share the same database connection. But of course, sharing database connections gets really wonky if you've got a server center in Australia and a server center in Germany, and they're like opening tunneled connections to a server in North America. Headaches. So you can do it, but that's not the type of solution that's going to make your IT manager smile. If you tell them you've got an HTTP-based web service that can handle the search for all of those sites, big smile. Solr's scalable. It replicates out of the box. It's a technology that's built into it, so you can have as many Solr servers as you need to handle the demand. So one of the points that drew me to Solr for search was that it's a point of scalability that we don't currently have. Gerhardt is the Drupal.org hero and got us through the last year of growth. At one point, that involved turning search off. But that was for the Drupal 5 release, right? About that time.
Yeah, it was multiple times, actually.
Multiple times, where the only way to keep the Drupal.org boxes online involved turning search off. It's a very expensive thing to do with MySQL. And there are dedicated MySQL search solutions out there, and some people in the community, such as Chicks, Caroline Nijeski, they're investigating things like that as competing alternatives to Solr. But I'm of the opinion that lots of options is good. So this opens up a point of scalability where if you're having a problem with your performance, you just add more boxes to the Solr cluster, and boom, you took care of your problem. I mean, everybody knows that buying a new computer, buying a new server is way easier than optimizing your software. It's way easier. You go to optimize your software, you end up breaking it, and this way you just buy more equipment. Okay, so anybody who has done their homework and gone to Drupal.org and searched around for Solr will have noticed that there are 2 modules. There's the Apache Solr module, which is for me. Gotta love Dino. And then there's the Solr module, which is from a gentleman named Alf Eaton in Great Britain somewhere. And he and I spoke about this before I launched on the process of building my module. And his point of view was, well, hey, my module does exactly what I want it to, the way I want it to, and I don't have time to do anything else. And that's great. What does his module do? His module replaces the core search module completely. You can't use both at the same time. His lifts a whole bunch of code out of the core search module and reuses the parts that he likes in his module. He populates the same function namespaces so that, like, if you actually tried having both of them installed, you get a duplicate function error. And he also requires that you have a different Solr instance running for every content type, so you search always within one silo of content. So these were design decisions that I didn't want to abide by, which is the short history of why I wrote a different module. So, big issue before we actually start seeing this thing work, right? How do you get it up and running? And I just want to stress, this is really easy, okay? You need Java 1.5 or later, also known as Java 5, I guess. You go to the Solr site, you download the tarball, you unpack it, you get the schema XML from my module, the Apache Solr module, and you put it in solrconf in the example directory. There's an example application that comes with the Solr download. You navigate to that directory in the shell, and you type java-jar start.jar. Put a little ampersand after it if you want to forget about it and go home. And then it's up and running, basically. Then you've got, in this case, Jetty. A Jetty, I think it's Jetty, not Resin. It's Jetty application server that's running from the jar file on whatever machine you started this on. And on port 8983, you can access the Solr instance. But the Apache Solr module knows that already. If you just do everything out of the box, just like I said right there, it'll work. This is the only documentation that exists, so take a picture. Please, somebody upload it to my module so that other people have documentations, because that's the one detail of this that I've overlooked so far. But it really is easy. We can have a Solr installation party later if you'd like. Just find me. So I want to say a little bit about who uses Solr. I don't have a lot of examples, but you'll know a couple of them. Dig uses Solr. And it's interesting in part because what you can do about it, you can filter and sort the content, and these are all built-in features of Solr. So with Drupal search results, it's impossible to, without using the advanced search box, it's impossible to filter the content. You can with the advanced search box, which is okay. It's not everything that I'd hoped for, but it's okay. But you can't sort the results. And with Solr, you can sort results. So if I wanted to see the content that's too old, for example, then I would have been, if this feature were implemented in my module, then I would be able to sort the search results. The Apache Solr module, which I wrote, doesn't implement that feature yet. And I'll point out all of the features that are still in the future. And I'm in the process of finding other people who are interested in developing on this, because I get constant offers with sometimes really sizable funding to develop this, and I don't have a lot of time. So if you're interested in being an Apache Solr module developer, I definitely want to talk to you. And I'm looking for as many people to learn this as possible. And there's a sizable pipeline of projects that are moving through that I would love to send your way because I can't take them myself. But there are some people who are doing some Solr projects who are helping me with the development. And when I say that a feature like sorting is not yet implemented, it's reasonable to say that it will be pretty soon, because I know an Ivy League university who wants it, for example, and they're paying for it. So it's on the way. So sorting content is one of the features. So Dig uses it. Who else uses Solr? Who knows Netflix here? Okay. They don't have European operations, do they? No. My mom loves Netflix. She used it as a verb the other day on the telephone. So I Netflixed it, and yeah, Netflix uses solar. I have to see what comes next. Anything? Aha. Okay, so the solar features that are really attractive, I just pointed out a couple of them, but the big one is this thing called faceted search. And I'm actually going to get around to demonstrating solar and faceted search after I have my fun with Keynote. But what faceted search means is that you do a search for a keyword, and in addition to the search results that you get that everybody's accustomed to, you also get some information and clues and guides as to how you can narrow down the scope of your search to focus in on the content that you're really looking for. So the way that it's currently implemented in the Apache Solr module is that you can, for example, narrow it down by a content type, or narrow it down by the author of the content, or narrow it down by a CCK text field. For example, if you had a CCK text field that was called fruit, you had apples, oranges, and pears. Solr would tell you, okay, out of the 20 results that you have for fruit salad, 7 of them have orange, 12 have apples, and 1 has pear. And if you click down, you'll get that subset as a search result. And I'll demonstrate that, that'll make more sense. Another type of facet would be a range search, where I'm looking for sheet music. I've got a website where you're looking for sheet music, and I'm interested in tangos from the 1930s. So I could say tangos in the search box, and then I would be able to filter on a range of years. So I would say between 1930 and 1939 or 1940, and I'd be able to narrow that range. That's another type of facet that Solr supports. So, for example, if I knew that this post about Google search on Drupal.org was written in 2004, I would be able to narrow the search down to 2004, or a range, or maybe 3 months out of 2004. And because it's a faceted search, Solr will tell me how many results lie ahead if I do that. I mean, it's a little different for range queries, but for the apples, oranges, pears, it works really well. There are 13 results in apples. Click here to reduce. So that's one of the really golden features about Solr and range facets, as I mentioned. Spelling suggestions. Not yet implemented in the Apache Solr module, looking for help and volunteers. However, at the Solr level and the Lucene level, spelling suggestions are already there. And as far as I understand the way this works, now somebody can fact check me on this or correct me if I'm just wrong, it doesn't take some dictionary and say, oh, I'm going to look up every word that you're typing into this dictionary and see, did you spell that right? Did I spell D-R-U-P-L or D-R-U-P-E-L? What it does is it looks at the statistics of your index, and it says, oh, you typed D-R-U-P-L, and there's, out of the 210,000 nodes on Drupal.org, there are 5 results. But if you spelled that D-R-U-P-A-L, there would be 210,000 results. Did you mean that instead? So everybody's familiar with this type of technology from Google. Of course, because if you blatantly misspell something into the Google search box, it will give you whatever results it finds, but it will also suggest, did you mean, ta-da? And I use that as a dictionary. I mean, who needs a spell checker? You just type something into Google. So there was a good example of this on the car ride here. My friend Jam, themer for hire. My friend Jam was telling me about a film by Benini. And I went to Netflix. What did I do here? Yeah. I went to Netflix, and hopefully the film will run. And I searched for Benini, B-E-N-I-N-N-I, and that's wrong. But I didn't know that. I had no idea that Benini was not spelled like this. But when I searched for Benini, results by Benini, because there is actually somebody in the film industry who's named Benini. I've never heard of any of the films. But I also got this suggestion for Robert Benigni, B-E-N-I-G-N-I, which I would have never guessed because I don't spell Italian, or I don't speak Italian. And that was exactly the film that, was it Night on Earth or something, or Down by Law that you were telling me about, right? And there it is, Solr. Suggested the spelling for Benini based on the statistics that it had in its own database, in its own index. It said, yeah, Benini with 2 N's, yeah, we'll give you something there, but you really might look at this B-E-G-N-I guy. That's what I wanted. So that's a really interesting feature that I could see being potentially useful for a lot of websites. And Solr offers that, and I need help implementing that in the Apache Solr module. Another very interesting feature that's not yet implemented in my module, but hopefully will be very soon, especially if you help me, is keyword extraction. So, has anybody ever used the Yahoo keyword extraction service? It's great. You send some content there, and they give you back a list of keywords extracted from your content saying, these are the real interesting ones. And Solr does the same thing. It looks at the index that you've got built, and it measures all the words in any piece of content for the interestingness quotient of it. And it's kind of this thing about reverse frequency. The less frequent a specific word is, the more interesting it is. I'm going to take the word the in the English language, for example. You get it everywhere, and it's totally not interesting. You've heard it 10,000 times today, and you didn't even notice. It's so uninteresting that it breezes by. I mean, Drupal in this room gets spoken every 3 seconds. And you don't perk up every time you hear Drupal. But if you were in McDonald's in Malibu, Florida, and somebody said Drupal, you'd be like, hark, what heareth I? Because that's interesting, because nobody says Drupal in Malibu, Florida, that I know. So the index does the same thing, and it measures the interestingness of any word based on the kind of the inverse frequency of it. So I could see this being very interesting for content recommendation. Who runs e-commerce sites? The best thing you can do on an e-commerce site is when they come to look at red shoes, as you said, you might be interested in blue shoes, because then they buy twice as much or 3 times as much. And it works for Amazon. I mean, they sell me all sorts of stuff. They figured out that I was interested in a book by Robert Douglas. So that's really, I see Solr as being a content recommendation engine. So here we're moving into a whole different topic of conversation, but a lot of ears should be going, Oh, faceted search. This is a range search. So this is a trip, a hotel thing, and I've searched for Brussels. And now I'm narrowing the search to be between $50 and $450, and it's updating it over here in real time. Not yet implemented, but it could be with your help. This is a faceted search. It says, okay, if I'm looking for 2-star hotels, there are 12 of them. If I'm looking for 4 stars, there are 29 of them. If I'm looking for family hotels, there are 9 of them. Business hotels, 23 of them. That way I know that if I click on one of those links, I know how many results I'm going to get. I'm not going to go look for fetish hotels because there aren't any in Brussels. It just doesn't show me any fetish hotels. If there were some, it would show them to me. Hey, 5 fetish hotels. And I click there. So besides these really great features, one of the big things that I already mentioned that attracted me to Solr was the aspect of performance. I get a lot of calls from people who are unhappy with their Drupal site's performance. It's on everybody's radar. Anybody who's got any serious traffic has dealt with it. There are X number of ways that you can scale the database. There are X number of ways you can add web clients. You can add squid proxies. You can add memcache. You can add static file servers. You can turn modules off. You can add Drupal caching. You can do a whole bunch of things. But you can't scale the search. If you want search on your site, and it's got to go fast, you got to use Google or Yahoo these days. There are no options. If you turn on a Drupal search, you end up in the same situation that Gerhardt was in, where the site was crashing and you had to do something. So I thought, okay, I don't want to mess with the Drupal core code that much because it's really complex. So I can take this black box and I can write some glue code and I get the two to work together and voila, it goes fast. And it is fast for many reasons. You can scale the Solr cluster horizontally by adding more boxes. It takes a lot of the load off the database for two reasons, and I'll show you why in a second. Well, one big reason, by replacing the search altogether, but there's a second element of that I'll get to that could be informative for Drupal's core search. It gives you the extra point of scalability. So this is a citation. I'll read it to you. If you go to the Solr website, there are many performance citations, but I picked a couple that are interesting, just to give you an idea, because I haven't done exhaustive benchmarking of this. I need help. I'm one guy, I can't do everything. I've been using Solr for keyword search on discogs.com for a few months with great results. As of today, Solr is running under Tomcat on a single dedicated box. It's a 2.66 gigahertz Pentium 4 with 1 gigabyte of RAM, which is a very small box. The index has about 1.2 million documents. Drupal.org has 210,000. And is 1.2 gigs in size. That's the search index. This machine handles 250,000 search queries per day with no problem. CPU load stays around 0.15 most of the time. Gerhard, do we have any rough ballpark estimate for search?
I don't know. I mean, 100 per hour or so.
100 per hour, so yeah. I mean, we get, what, 7 million a month? Total requests, right? Yeah, so they're getting more than that just for the search box. At Netflix, we switched over our site search to Solr 2 weeks ago. We've seen 0 problems with the server. We average 1.2 million queries a day on 250,000 item index. We're running 4 Solr servers with simple round-robin HTTP load share. That's a lot of searching. And several of those queries were from me today.
And your mom.
And my mom, who's been Netflixing her butt off. Okay, so the first experience of hopping over to my web browser scared the living daylights out of me because I had to brutally kill my keynote process. I'm not going to do that right now, maybe, but I'm just going to explain to you and maybe post some notes. No, I'm going to have to show you eventually. I just can't hold it back forever. But I've got a website, Solr, solr.robshouse.net, which I'll be publicizing on robshouse.net. And basically what it is Gerhard has prepared a sanitized version of the Drupal.org database, which I've been busy indexing. More on indexing a little bit in a second. It's only half indexed right now, so I had hoped that I'd have all 210,000 documents indexed, but it just takes a while, and I ran into some interesting problems that I had to overcome. However, the initial results with this bad Wi-Fi that everybody's sharing, when I search for Drupal on solr.robshouse.net, and this isn't empirical, there are a lot of flaws in this data collection here, but searching for Drupal on the Solr search generates 61 database queries, which take 36 milliseconds to execute. Total page execution time was 660 milliseconds. Core search for Drupal executed 277 queries in 44 seconds. Queries taking longer than 5 milliseconds. Yeah. And then I did it again because I couldn't believe it. And again, it took 277 queries, but it only took 29 seconds. So part of what's going on in the background, in case you think those are just unbelievable results that I just typed in there just to make a point, part of it is that it's a really tiny server, and there are some other sites on there, and it's not ready to search the Drupal or database, period. Okay, it's not equipped to do that, and I don't know if there's like some conflict between InnoDB and my ISAM and my MySQL instance, and there's a whole bunch of things. My MySQL is not configured for InnoDB, and there are a lot of things that are wrong with this. Okay, however, one thing wouldn't change: 277 queries. Why are there so many queries? That was a rhetorical question. I'll answer that in a moment. But first, a story, a real story. On August 1st, 2006, it was my first day on a new job, and I ended up flying to London on the very next day to save a prominent client's website that had just launched and was going down in flames. I think Dries was on the phone on that day with us, trying to figure out what the heck was going wrong. And one of the things that they showed me is they turned on the develop module, and it says 6,000 queries for a search result. Wow, there's something wrong there. You know, there's a loop. You know, it's like somebody's got the counter on the loop going wrong, right? You're just like, he's just doing the same thing 6,000 times, same query over and over. Some static caching will fix that. It was Hook Node API. They had 20, 30 modules that do something or the other on Hook Node API. They had boosted the number of nodes of search results that get shown on any page from 10 to 20. So they were getting 20 node loads on every search result page with these extra 20 Node API related modules that were all doing their own database queries. Every one of those 6,000 database queries was legit. To get a node with this much text. You're like, why do you need 5-star if all you're doing is this little highlighted text, right? So one of the reasons that we get 61 queries here, and half of them I can tell you are path lookups, and 277 queries here, is that we don't do any node loads on the search results. Solr has all of the information in it already. It gives everything I need to display the search result back as part of the result set. And this is something we could do for Drupal.org, for Drupal as a core search strategy. It would make our index get bigger, but we wouldn't have to do a node load every time. No.
No, but really you rise up the numbers in time. The pure search queries take ages because
The temporary tables.
One of the table is huge. It has about 40 billion entries.
Yeah.
So that's why it takes so long. That's the only reason. The number of queries doesn't matter.
Okay. However, with all of the Hook Node API modules, and a lot of sites do use that, any CCK or Views sites have Node API hooks. And if you have 10, 20 CCK fields on those nodes, those are all getting loaded.
CCK has its own cache for this. Stick it to the man.
Okay, so Solr does some things in terms of search result relevancy a little bit different than Drupal does. Drupal has a lot of really cool stuff under the covers in its search. It weighs the HTML so that if you have something in H1 tags, those are more important words than if they're in strong tags, and strong tags are more important than clear text. It also weights stuff that's at the top of the page higher than the stuff that's lower in the page. It's all really good. It'd be nice if we could configure that. We can, but it's nice that it's there. Solr doesn't do anything with the HTML. It does the stuff with the top of the page being more important than the bottom of the page, and that's really helpful. But it ignores HTML, straight out. And in fact, that gives you some, in the current implementation, that gives you some funny results because it finds the href attributes for A-links, for anchor links. And if I search, for example, if I search the Drupal.org database for robshouse.net, it'll find links that come to my site, but they don't show up in the highlighted text. So I get a search result where robshouse.net isn't visible because it's invisible text in the href attribute. That's potentially useful, but you should be able to see it, so that's a limitation. Drupal lets you have scoring factors where you can say recency is more important than the number of comments, or a number of comments is more important than the keyword relevancy, or the, what's the fourth one? I always forget. You can define factors that boost certain elements of the ranking. So you can do this at runtime. You can change it in your Drupal search configuration, and you can tweak it so that you get better results. Solr can do that too. In fact, Solr has much more fine-grained control. You can do it for any field, and I'm going to explain fields very soon. However, Solr doesn't have any page rank concept. Drupal search, and Google search, of course, has this concept of incoming links giving more weight to a piece of content. So if there were two pieces of content, both of which mentioned barbecue, and 50 people linked to this one, it would come higher in their search results simply for the fact that people linked to that. In fact, if they linked to it and said, the worst barbecue of my life, then the link text from this other content that points here would give the keywords to this content. So I could find this content by saying worst barbecue, even though worst barbecue doesn't even appear in this content. So Drupal does all that, Solr doesn't. So there's no page rank or keyword lending mechanism going on in Solr. We could program that, but I need help from somebody to do that because I'm just one guy. So for those of you who are familiar with Lucene, you're probably familiar with the amazingly complex and fine-grained pipelines they set up for processing text when it gets indexed and processing the search query when it gets queried. There are tokenizers and analyzers and filters, and you can chain them together in huge configuration files this long, and you can write your own Java classes to do it, and there are huge libraries of Java classes that you can call on to configure it the way you want. So if you've got a special need, you can do it. You can also search other documents like PDFs or Word documents or Excel. That's all possible, not yet implemented at the Drupal level. So what that looks like when we get to the Drupal side of things is that I went through and I defined a whole bunch of fields. That's probably really hard to read. But what you see here is title and body and user ID and node ID and changed, and these are the typical fields that you see in the node table. And I index all those. They all get sent to the Solr machine during index time, and it does certain things with them, and I define what it does. For example, for the title of any node, I said that it's a text type, which makes a lot of sense, but that's different than a string type. Okay, text gets some processing that strings don't, or the other way around. I'd have to work that. I think text gets left alone and strings get processed. However, they don't get indexed, so, and neither does body. So I get really detailed here, but those actually get lumped together in another field called text later, and that gets indexed. Which means that Solr doesn't actually store that stuff. It doesn't break it up into words, but it does store it. It stores them as exact copies, and I do that so that I can give it back. So Solr can give the title and the body back to Drupal to avoid this node load. And then there are integer types, and I can determine whether they're indexed and whether they're stored. And there's a type for TID, which is text or term ID for taxonomy terms. And here, in this case, it's not only indexed and stored, but it's multi-value. So you can have a node that has many taxonomy terms, and that's all as part of one document. And I've also got the taxonomy name in there. So this is all stuff that I just thought up. You know, I just figured out by reading the documentation how it should work, how I'd expect it to work, and you can change this. You can go in and you can make your own data schema You might have to adjust the code at the Drupal side, but there's this world of flexibility in terms of the search results and the quality. So Keynote's really funny. It's showing me, in the presenter slide, it's showing me stuff from like 7 slides ago, and I'm constantly confused. So I wanted to explain just very briefly the concept between indexed and stored. So indexed means that I can do searches against it, and I don't have to index everything. I would probably never search for a timestamp, for example. Okay, I'm not going to type a Unix timestamp into the search box and look for content that matches that. Gerhard. Gerhard would do that. I know he would. So therefore, I don't have to index it, but I want to store that so that I can give it back to Drupal later for the presentation, and also for sorting and for range queries. And the stored stuff, if you're looking at the schema file later, that's good for if you want to do the highlighting. So if I search for Drupal, then it boldfaces the words Drupal in the text snippet that it gives you back. Okay. That's all not very interesting in fact. I kind of hinted that there's a difference between how Solr handles stuff that's being indexed versus how it handles stuff that's being queried. And all I wanted to say with this not so full slide is that you've got different pipelines that you can configure for how incoming text gets handled at index time and how incoming text gets handled at query time. But that's all not very interesting. Okay, this is much more interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit more about Drupal as a search framework, because it's another reason why Solr might be interesting to you. And doing this Apache Solr module taught me a lot about the Drupal search framework. So, I don't know, has anybody ever written a custom search module? Has anybody read the Pro Drupal development book and done the search example in there? If not, very highly recommended. You learn a lot about the search framework from the Pro Drupal development book, and they've got 2 great examples about how to extend it. Because the idea that Drupal has is that you've got a framework provided by Drupal that you can extend to do searches of all nature. But it's really hard to use. And it's got some limitations. And then Drupal also comes with 2 implementations of searches, one for content and one for users. And the users one is totally useless. And the content one is the one we've been talking about, comparing, so forth. And that one is hard-coded, always turned on into the node module. So you've got the search framework and 2 implementations of searches that make up the core Drupal search. And this discussion pertains to the Drupal search framework, not the implementations. Okay, so one of the things that it offers you is that on the search page, you can write a module that adds another tab to the search page and gives you another opportunity for searching. If you go to Drupal.org right now and go to the search page, you'll see 4 or 5 tabs at the moment. You see content search, user search. Those are the 2 implementations that are built into core. You see IRC nickname search. You see issue search, so you can search for project issues. Can't remember if there's another one. So those come from contributed modules using the search framework in that way. And that works really well. The search framework in Drupal gives you generic keyword handling. By that I mean not only the keywords that you type in clear text, but you can also do field definitions. So if I'm looking for content type : book, then the framework gives me as a developer a way to know that the first part of the query is type and the second part is book. It doesn't work with spaces, however. It only works if there's no space in the second part. I've got a patch for that. Or if if I was looking for a user ID 5449, for example, that would be another way that the Drupal search framework helps me as an application developer. And it offers the same indexing that it offers for the content search that we're all familiar with from Drupal.org. You can use that in any module that you write to index text and use for your own search purposes. In fact, I wrote a content recommendation engine for a sheet music website that I built based on that. I index all the information about my sheet music, and then I send keywords into there like Beethoven Symphony, and I get search results back, and I use that as content recommendation. And that doesn't show up in the normal search of the site. I'm just using that indexer as a way to do my own custom search. It gives you theming for search results. It gives you the excerpt highlighting. You can do programmatic searches, so you don't have to wait for somebody to post a form through the website. You can actually just call the do search function and get search results. It has the dynamic scoring factors that I mentioned. And it has theming for search results twice. However, it has a lot of limitations, and these are my personal battle plan for Drupal 7. You can't turn off the content and user searches. So I wrote a module that's basically a patch that gets them out of the core modules and puts them in their own modules that could then become their own first-class core modules. It's called Core Searches. I don't have a slide for it. But you can't turn off the content or user search, so therefore if you go and get the Apache Solr module, install it, you'll have 3 tabs. Maybe you only want one. Well, you're screwed. You got to get my module, which takes them out. The scoring factor query injection is so unbelievably fragile and complicated that I doubt anybody's ever used it past the core implementation. You basically send the do search function 4 or 5 SQL snippets that get used in different queries during the parsing. It makes your head explode. The queries, you know, they're like this long, and you're responsible for this little snippet in here, and you can do that in parameter 3 gets inserted here when you create that temporary table the first time. Very hard. So that needs some reworking. The markup weights, I told you that anything in HTML gets weighted differently. You can't change that. Right now, I think the H1 scoring for Drupal is so high that the titles get a lot of weight, but almost nothing else does. And it would be nice to be able to play around with that without having to edit the code. And just making an interface for that, or even just exposed variables would be great, but right now it's not. The cron-based indexing is really fragile. There's a node 9337 on Drupal.org that has evaluated PHP text in it that says header location equals. And Chrome never makes it past. Every time it gets redirected to a different node on Drupal.org. Every time you try and index that, and this is part of why I only have half the index on solr.robshouse.net. I was like, why isn't it going past that? And finally I realized that every time it tries to index this, it evaluates the PHP and redirects to Drupal.org in the middle of the Chrome. So this Chrome-based indexing is really brittle. And I've seen other clients have exactly the same type of problem with their sites. It's a common problem. And the Drupal forums have other people who have problems. So we've got to look at that for Drupal 7. We got rid of the temporary tables, didn't we, for Drupal 6?
Yes. Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did? Okay. So this point is no longer true, but it's true for Drupal 5. Because the name of the temporary table was hard-coded, you could only do one search for any page. So I wanted my content recommendation engine to do content recommendation for search results too. You know, I wanted people to search for sheet music using the search, and then I wanted to recommend them other stuff based on other stuff. Okay, I had this plan. Doesn't work. Can't do 2 searches on one page. Was that it? Okay. So I've only got 5 minutes left. I'm going to skip over to the browser right now, and I'm going to invite you to look at this site later on your own. This is solr.robshouse.net. What do we want to search for? Drupal. So the internet connection here is fast, as you probably know. And I've already said that my site is highly, it's going to say that every time. That my site is just simply overburdened by the responsibility of searching Drupal's site. And this applies to both the Apache Solr search as well as the core search. Works a little better if you're not at Fosdem, I've noticed. So try it at home by all means and look for the blog post that I write about everything here. If it comes, then I can show you the faceted search. What do I have here? Okay, close that. Yeah, okay, so this part of the demonstration is just not going to work well. Oh, there we go, okay. So here are the facets that I told you about. There's some, so first here are the results. The node titled Drupal got the first, and then Drupal 5 got the second. That's probably because Drupal is a less special term in this title than that term because there are more words. I mean, here it's the whole thing, right? Here it's only half the thing. And number 5 is the other part. But the interesting stuff is the facets over here. I can see that if I limit that to forum topics, there are 49,000 topics, but if I'm only looking for issues, there are 28,000 of those. If that's a module that's not installed, that's why it's not telling me what those are. There are only 4 polls that mention Drupal, and 3 stories. So let's limit it to the 802 projects, and then hope that it doesn't take another 5 minutes to search. The other facets that I have available are the forums, Drupal core compatibility, author, and here's where I need some interface advice. The list of authors here is immense, and I haven't limited it in any way. And you can also, by the way, you can also see the queries that this does. They're available to the public, so you can check that out as well. But you know, it's really interesting to see who wrote what. So for example, now if I wanted to limit that posts by chicks, I know that there are only going to be 4. And there they are. So these are posts, and you can see in the breadcrumbs, these are Drupal projects written by chicks. And I got there really quick. I didn't have to crack open the advanced search form or anything. And actually, the advanced search form can't formulate this exact query because it can't limit it to an author. So that's the very quick example. If I want to get rid of part of that, like maybe I want to see all of the posts by chicks that are about Drupal, notice that's a different order than I got there, then I can unclick the project part of it, and then now I can see all the book pages by chicks about Drupal, and I can move in and out of my search query deeper, back up a level, go down a couple levels, come back up a level using these faceted searches, and I only go to the places where content exists, and I never have to guess what would Drupal say, or what would Google say. I don't have to think into the mind of the search engine. It tells me what it has available. How much time? Any time left? Okay, thank you very much. I'll be outside if you have questions. Sorry I didn't leave that.